I'm Isabella, 34 female. I live in a minimalist apartment overlooking the city, a place that feels more like a charging station than a home. By day, I run a cybersecurity firm that I built from the ground up, a world of code, firewalls, and high-stakes digital warfare. My life is a carefully constructed fortress of my own design, built to keep the chaos out and my focus in. But no fortress, no matter how strong, can keep family from finding the cracks. This is the story of how I went back to the one place I'd run from, only to find that the past wasn't just waiting for me. It was about to get a system-wide crash. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, wedged between a venture capital funding update and a critical threat assessment report. The subject line was deceptively simple: family reunion. The sender was my Aunt Patricia. For most people, this might be a pleasant notification, a chance to reconnect. For me, it was a summons. My stomach tightened into a familiar knot, the same one I'd felt every time I had to face them. The email was bubbly, filled with exclamation points and talk of potluck assignments and celebrating family togetherness. It was a masterclass in passive aggression, a sweetly poisoned invitation to my own trial. I hadn't attended one of these gatherings in 5 years. My excuse had always been work, a convenient and true shield. My company, Aegis Cyber, was my life. It demanded everything from me, and I gave it willingly because it was the one place where my value wasn't up for debate. It was measured in results, in contracts secured, in threats neutralized. At home, my value was measured against a single glaring failure. I was a college dropout. My family's definition of success was painfully narrow and traditional. You go to a good college, you get a good degree, you get a stable job, you get married, and you buy a house in a respectable suburb. My brother Daniel had checked every box. He was a civil engineer with a wife, 2 kids, and a mortgage. He was the golden child. My sister Emily was the baby, the artist. She'd finished her design degree and was now engaged to Alex, a man they all approved of. She was on the correct path. I was the anomaly, the cautionary tale whispered to younger cousins. The one who had the audacity to drop out of a prestigious computer science program in her junior year because she believed she had a better idea. To them, it wasn't a strategic move, it was a surrender. They couldn't comprehend leaving a guaranteed path for an uncertain dream. The fact that I never spoke about my work in detail only fueled their narrative. In their minds, my silence was shame. They pictured me struggling, probably doing some low-level IT support, living paycheck to paycheck, too embarrassed to admit my grand venture had failed. I let them believe it. It was easier than trying to explain the complexities of threat intelligence or the nuances of venture capital. It was simpler than justifying my choices to people who had made up their minds about me a decade ago. So I kept my worlds separate. My business world knew me as I.S. Thompson, the founder of Aegis. My family knew me as Isabella, the disappointing dropout. The text from my mother came an hour after the email. "Did you see Patricia's email? It would mean so much to everyone if you came. Emily and Alex will be there, and we want to celebrate their engagement properly." It was the classic guilt trip, expertly deployed. My father followed up with a call. His tone was less emotional, more pragmatic. "Isabella, it's time to put this behind you. Just come for a few hours. Show your face. Don't make it a big deal." That was his mantra. Don't make a deal out of the deep, festering wounds of our family dynamics. Just pretend they don't exist. The final nail in the coffin was a message from my brother Daniel. "Heard you might show up. Just try to keep a low profile. Don't embarrass us tonight." Don't embarrass us. Not yourself, but us. My success or failure was, in their eyes, a reflection on the family's reputation. My refusal to conform was a stain they had to manage. I stared at my calendar, at the back-to-back meetings, at the planned trip to a cybersecurity conference in London next month. My life was full, successful, and entirely of my own making. So why did this one email, this one mandatory gathering, feel like a bigger threat than any hacker trying to breach our clients' servers? Because this was a different kind of breach. It was personal. It was an attack on the foundations of who I was aimed at the insecure girl I used to be, not the woman I had become. For years, I had avoided this. I had built my walls high. But Emily's engagement changed things. I loved my sister, and despite family baggage, I wanted to be there for her. Alex, her fiancé, seemed like a good guy from the few times we'd spoken on video calls. He was smart, a tech journalist, which was a detail that gave me a slight pause. He understood my world, or at least a version of it. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. A small, naive part of me hoped that after all these years, they might finally see me, not the caricature they had created. That hope was a flicker in a hurricane. I knew what to expect. Aunt Patricia would lead the charge, her comments coated in a thin veneer of concern. My cousins would snicker. My parents would offer weak, placating smiles and change the subject. Daniel would look at me with that familiar mix of pity and annoyance. It was a script we had all memorized. But this time, I wasn't the same actress. I wasn't the wounded 20-year-old anymore. I was 34. I was a CEO. I had faced down corporate boards, hostile investors, and international cyber threats. I had built an empire from nothing but an idea and a relentless refusal to fail. Surely, I could handle one family dinner. I typed out a reply to my mother. "I'll be there, looking forward to celebrating with Emily and Alex." I hit send before I could change my mind. The decision was made. I was walking back into the lion's den. But this time, I wasn't going in as a lamb to the slaughter. I was going in as the lion they just hadn't recognized yet. The reunion was in 3 days. I marked it on my calendar not as a family event, but as a strategic operation. Objective, survive, and maybe, just maybe, rewrite the script. The drive to my aunt's house was a journey back in time. With every mile I put between myself and the city, the sleek, glass-and-steel confidence of my world seemed to peel away, replaced by the suffocating green of the suburbs. This was the world I had escaped, a place of manicured lawns and unspoken judgments, where conformity was the highest virtue. My car, a discreet but powerful German sedan, felt like an alien spacecraft on these quiet, tree-lined streets. I had debated what to wear, a ridiculous amount of thought for a simple family barbecue. A power suit would be seen as a costume, an arrogant attempt to prove something. Too casual, and it would confirm their narrative of me as the struggling artist type who couldn't hold down a real job. I settled on a compromise: dark, well-fitting jeans, a simple silk blouse, and a tailored blazer. It was an outfit that said, "I am put together, but I am not trying too hard." It was armor. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw the familiar cars of my relatives lining the street. A wave of anxiety washed over me, cold and sharp. I took a deep breath, killed the engine, and repeated the mantra that had gotten me through countless high-stakes negotiations. You are in control. You define your value. I walked up the stone path to the front door, a bottle of expensive wine in hand, a small, customary gesture. Before I could even ring the bell, the door swung open. It was my Aunt Patricia, her face a mask of forced cheerfulness. "Isabella, you made it. We were starting to wonder if you'd get lost on your way out of the big city." Her tone was light, but the jab was clear. To her, I was a stranger to this world now, an outsider. Behind her, the house buzzed with the familiar sounds of a family gathering, the murmur of conversations, the clinking of glasses, the laughter of my cousins. It was a wall of sound that I had to push through. "Hello, Aunt Patricia. The house looks lovely," I said, my voice even and calm. I handed her the wine. She glanced at the label, her eyebrows raising slightly. It was a vintage I knew she couldn't afford from her little gift shop, a subtle move she would understand. She took it with a tight smile. "Well, come on in. Everyone in the backyard." As I stepped inside, the scrutiny began. Eyes flickered towards me, conversations paused for a fraction of a second, and then resumed, just a little too loudly. It was the welcome of a pariah. In the backyard, the scene was exactly as I had pictured. My uncle was manning the grill, my cousins were clustered around a table playing cards, and my parents were in conversation with another couple. My brother, Daniel, stood near the cooler, holding a beer. He saw me and gave a curt nod, his expression unreadable. I made my way over to my parents first. My mother hugged me, a brief, tense embrace. "I'm so glad you came, honey," she whispered, as if she were thanking a diplomat for crossing enemy lines. My father clapped me on the shoulder. Good to see you, Isabella. There was no warmth, only relief that I had fulfilled my familial duty. The small talk was excruciating. They asked about my apartment, my car, if I was managing okay. They never asked about my work. It was the great unmentionable, the topic to be avoided at all costs, like a death or a scandal. I gave them vague, polite answers, feeling like a ghost at my own family reunion. I was there, but I wasn't really seen. After a few minutes of this stilted exchange, Aunt Patricia reappeared, her smile wider and sharper this time. She had an audience. "Isabella," she said, her voice carrying across the patio. "It's been so long. We were all just saying, we have no idea what you're even doing with yourself these days. Still tinkering with those computers." The word tinkering was designed to diminish, to infantilize. It painted a picture of a hobby, not a career. My cousins chuckled. Daniel took a long sip of his beer, his eyes fixed on the ground. My parents looked deeply uncomfortable but silent. This was Patricia's stage, and she was the star of the show. I met her gaze, refusing to flinch. "Something like that," I replied, my tone neutral. My refusal to give her the dramatic reaction she craved only seemed to spur her on. "Well, I hope it's going well for you," she continued, her voice dripping with condescension. "Because you know, that college degree is the one thing no one can ever take away from you. It's such a shame you never finished. But don't expect any respect here. You're still the failure who never finished college." The words hung in the air, brutal and deliberate. The scattered laughter from my cousins that followed was like salt in the wound. My face burned with a familiar hot shame. This was the script. This was the role I was meant to play, the family disappointment. I looked at my parents, pleading with my eyes for them to say something, anything. My mother just gave a weak, helpless shrug. My father suddenly found something interesting to look at in the distance. They would not defend me. They never did. It was my brother's comment that cut the deepest. He walked over, not to defend me, but to manage the situation. He leaned in close and muttered, "See? This is why you should have stayed away. Just don't embarrass us tonight." He wasn't angry at Patricia for her cruelty. He was angry at me for being the target, for creating a scene simply by existing. I felt the familiar urge to flee, to get in my car and drive back to the safety of my city, my company, my life. But then I saw my sister, Emily, walking over with her fiancé, Alex. Emily looked mortified, her cheeks flushed. Alex looked confused, an outsider witnessing a bizarre and cruel family ritual for the first time. Emily shot me an apologetic look, but she didn't say anything to her aunt. She was trapped, just as I was, in the web of unspoken rules and toxic dynamics. It was in that moment that my resolve hardened. Running away would only prove them right. It would cement my status as the one who couldn't handle it. I had spent a decade building a life where I was respected, where my intellect and vision were the only things that mattered. I would not let them strip that away from me in a single evening. I would not let them win. I straightened my shoulders, forced a polite, detached smile onto my face, and turned to my sister. "Emily, you look beautiful. And this must be Alex. It's so good to finally meet you in person." I extended a hand, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. I would play their game, but I would do it by my own rules. The night was far from over. The next couple of hours were a masterclass in emotional endurance. I moved through the party with a practiced grace, engaging in meaningless conversations about the weather, sports, and my cousin's children. I was an actress playing the part of the carefree relative, all while Aunt Patricia's words echoed in my mind. She watched me from across the yard, a smug look on her face, convinced she had put me in my place. Daniel avoided me, busying himself with grilling burgers. My parents floated around, careful to keep a safe distance, as if my failure might be contagious. The only bright spot was Emily and Alex. They made a point to stick by my side, creating a small buffer against the rest of the family. Emily was visibly upset by what had happened, her apologies whispered every time we were alone for a moment. "I'm so sorry, Izzy. She's awful." I squeezed her hand. "It's not your fault, Em. Don't worry about it." I appreciated her sympathy, but I didn't want her to feel responsible for the family's deep-seated dysfunction. Alex, on the other hand, was quietly observant. As a journalist, he was a professional people watcher, and I could feel him analyzing the dynamics, trying to piece together the story. He was polite, asking me general questions about my life in the city, but I noticed he never asked the one question everyone else avoided. "What do you do for work?" I was grateful for his tact. He had clearly read the room and understood that it was a sensitive topic. We sat down to eat at a long picnic table, and the seating arrangement was a perfect map of the family hierarchy. Aunt Patricia and my uncle sat at the head, holding court. My parents sat near them, along with Daniel and his F. Emily. I was seated at the far end, with Emily, Alex, and a few of the younger, more indifferent cousins. The conversation was loud and overlapping, a tapestry of boasts and gossip. Patricia was loudly recounting the success of her gift shop's recent summer solstice sale. Daniel was talking about a bridge project his firm had landed. It was all about reinforcing the family narrative of respectable, conventional success. I ate my potato salad in silence, a spectator to a play I wanted no part in. Then the moment came. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was a casual question thrown out in a lull in the conversation. It was Alex who asked it. He turned to me, his expression one of genuine curiosity. "So, Isabella," he began, his voice cutting through the nearby chatter. "Emily mentioned you're in the tech world. I'm a tech journalist, so I'm always interested. What exactly is it that you do?" The question was innocent, but it landed on the table like a grenade. A pocket of silence formed around us. My parents froze. Daniel's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Across the table, I could see Aunt Patricia's ears perk up, a predatory gleam in her eyes. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the public confession of my meager, unimpressive job. I took a sip of water, buying myself a second. I had a choice. I could give them the vague, dismissive answer they expected. "Oh, I do some consulting," or "I'm in IT support." Or I could tell the truth. After the humiliation I'd endured upon arriving, the choice was surprisingly clear. I was done protecting their fragile egos. I was done diminishing myself to make them comfortable. I looked directly at Alex, offering him a small, professional smile. "I'm the founder and CEO of a cybersecurity company," I said, my voice calm and clear. "It's called Aegis Cyber." The name meant nothing to most of them. I saw blank stares, a few confused frowns. My brother Daniel scoffed quietly, a small, disbelieving sound. Aunt Patricia let out a little laugh. "Oh, a CEO, isn't that fancy? Do you have little business cards and everything?" She sneered, winking at one of my cousins. But Alex's reaction was different. His eyes widened just slightly. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Aegis Cyber wasn't a household name, but in the tech and finance worlds, it was a major player. We handled security for some of the biggest corporations in the world, as well as several government agencies. We had been featured in industry publications, the kind a tech journalist would definitely read. "Aegis Cyber?" Alex repeated, his tone shifting from casual curiosity to something else entirely, disbelief and awe. "Wait, the Aegis Cyber. The one that handled the Northgate data breach last year. That was one of our most high-profile cases. We had been brought in to clean up a massive corporate espionage disaster and had done so with ruthless efficiency, saving the company billions. That was one of our contracts, yes," I confirmed simply. The air at the table grew thick. The name drop had a tangible effect. Alex was staring at me, his mind clearly racing. Without another word, he pulled out his phone. His thumbs moved quickly across the screen. I knew what he was doing. He was looking me up. He was Googling Aegis Cyber and CEO. Aunt Patricia, seeing the phone, rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, for goodness sake, Alex, don't encourage her fantasies." But her voice lacked its earlier conviction. A seed of doubt had been planted. The rest of the table watched, a silent, captive audience. We all saw the moment it happened. Alex's face, illuminated by the glow of his phone, went completely white. He sucked in a sharp breath. His eyes darted from the screen to me and back to the screen. He scrolled down, his expression shifting from shock to utter astonishment. He looked up at me, his mouth slightly agape. "My God," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You're I.S. Thompson." The room fell completely silent. The background chatter from the other end of the table died away as everyone turned to look. Forks froze midair. I.S. Thompson was the name I used professionally. It was the name on industry reports, on keynote speaker lists, on articles about the most influential women in tech. It was the name of a ghost, a powerful, anonymous figure in my family's world. And now, the ghost was sitting at their picnic table. Suddenly, everyone realized exactly who they'd been mocking. The silence that descended upon the backyard was profound. It wasn't just a lack of noise. It was heavy, filled with the frantic whirring of minds trying to reconcile two completely different realities. On one hand, there was Isabella, the college dropout failure, the family cautionary tale. On the other, there was I.S. Thompson, a name Alex had just spoken with the reverence of someone who had discovered a celebrity in their midst. The two identities could not coexist, yet here I was, embodying both. Alex was the furs. Tea to break the spell. He slowly placed his phone face down on the table as if it were a sacred artifact. He looked at me, then at Emily, then back at me. I wrote an article about Aegis last month, he stammered, his professional composure gone. About your firm's valuation after the Series C funding round. I had no idea. The founder is famously private. No photos, just the initials, IS. Everyone knew you were a woman, but... Wow, Series C funding. Valuation. These words were alien concepts at this picnic table. My cousins exchanged bewildered looks. My uncle, who had been listening from the grill, put his tongs down. He was now paying full attention. Aunt Patricia's face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Confusion, disbelief, and a rising tide of panic. "What are you talking about, Alex? What valuation?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "She's just Isabella. She tinkers with computers." But her words were hollow now. The certainty was gone, replaced by a desperate need for her version of reality to be true. Alex, still looking at me, ignored her. "Your company is valued at over $900 million, he said, the number dropping into the silence like a boulder into a pond. "They're calling you one of the most important figures in digital security. You testified before a congressional committee on infrastructure vulnerability 2 months ago." A sharp gasp came from my mother. Her hand flew to her mouth. My father looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. He just stared at me, his face pale. He was a man who respected numbers, who understood money, and that $900 million figure had just completely dismantled his perception of his own daughter. My brother Daniel's reaction was the most telling. The smirk was gone from his face, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure shock. He looked at me as if he had never seen me before in his life. The pity, the annoyance, the brotherly superiority, it all evaporated in an instant, leaving behind a gaping void of confusion. The whispers started then. My cousins pulled out their own phones, their fingers flying across the screens. A murmur rippled through the family as they found the articles, the Forbes features on innovators to watch, the interviews where I was quoted, but never pictured, the press releases about multi-million-dollar government contracts. They were unearthing a decade of my life that I had kept hidden, not out of shame, but because I knew they would never understand it. And I was right. They didn't understand the work, but they understood the language of success. They understood money, power, and influence. "Is this a joke?" one of my cousins asked, looking up from her phone. "Is this really you, Isabella?" I simply nodded, taking another calm bite of my dinner. My composure seemed to unnerve them more than anything else. They were expecting a grand reveal, a triumphant "I told you so." But I gave them nothing. I just sat there, letting the truth of my life settle over them, letting them choke on the disrespect they had so freely dished out just an hour before. The atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. The casual, judgmental air was gone, replaced by a tense, awkward reverence. No one knew what to say. How do you talk to the person you just called a failure when you find out they are more successful than everyone in the family combined, perhaps more than the entire town? My parents were the first to try. My mother started clearing plates that were still half full, her movements jerky and nervous. My father cleared his throat. "Well, Isabella," he said, his voice strained. "It seems you've been busy." It was a staggering understatement, but it was all he could manage. He couldn't bring himself to apologize, not yet. He couldn't even process the information. Aunt Patricia was silent. For the first time in my life, I saw her completely stripped of her power. Her authority was derived from her self-appointed role as the family's judge and jury. But her judgment had just been proven spectacularly, publicly wrong. Her entire worldview, where a college degree was the sole measure of a person's worth, had just collapsed. She looked at me, her eyes narrowed, not with anger anymore, but with a dawning, horrified realization. She hadn't just been wrong about me, she had made a fool of herself in front of the entire family, especially in front of Emily's impressive new fiancé. The family reunion she had orchestrated to reinforce her place at the top of the pyramid had become the stage for her own humiliation. The failure she had tried to mock all night wasn't me. It was her. And as the truth rippled outwards, destroying their comfortable illusions one by one, I knew that nothing in this family would ever be the same again. In the wake of the revelation, the party devolved into a state of suspended animation. People moved with a strange, hesitant energy, as if the laws of social physics had been temporarily repealed. The loud, confident chatter was replaced by hushed whispers and awkward silences. I had become the gravitational center of the event, and no one knew how to navigate the new orbit. My initial instinct, the one honed by years of avoiding conflict with them, was to smooth things over, to downplay it, to say, "It's not a big deal," to make them feel comfortable with their own appalling behavior. But as I sat there, watching them flail, a different feeling took root, a quiet, steely resolve. I had done nothing wrong. I had built my life on my own terms, through hard work and relentless dedication. Their ignorance was not my shame, their judgment was not my burden. I would not apologize for my success, and I would not manage their feelings about it. So my plan was simple: I would do nothing. I would remain calm, polite, and unreadable. I would let them sit in the deafening silence of their own making. My poise would be my power. Aunt Patricia, after a long, stunned silence, was the first to attempt a recovery. She adopted a tone of bewildered affection, as if this were all a delightful surprise. "Well, Isabella, a CEO, why on earth didn't you tell us?" she asked, her voice a little too bright. "We're your family, we would have been so proud." It was a masterful attempt to rewrite history, to shift the blame onto me for my secrecy rather than onto her for her cruelty. The implicit message was, "How could we have supported you if you never told us?" I looked at her, my expression neutral. "It didn't seem relevant," I said simply. My non-answer hung in the air, a polite but firm rejection of her premise. It was relevant now, wasn't it? It was relevant once they had a dollar figure to attach to my name. My brother Daniel was next. He approached me cautiously, a bottle of beer in his hand as a prop. He looked deeply uncomfortable, his face flushed. "Izzy," he started, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. That's incredible. I had no idea." He was searching for a way back, a way to erase his earlier command to not embarrass us. "I know," I said. It was a simple statement of fact, but it carried the full weight of our fractured relationship. I knew he had no idea because he had never bothered to ask. He had never shown an ounce of genuine curiosity about my life beyond whether or not it adhered to his narrow definition of success. He lingered for a moment, waiting for me to absolve him, to say, "It's okay." I didn't. I just looked at him, and eventually he retreated, defeated by my silence. My parents were perhaps the most pathetic. They came over and sat down, one on either side of me, creating the illusion of a united family. "Honey, we are just shocked," my mother said, her voice trembling slightly. "A congressional committee? Isabella, why wouldn't you tell your own mother something like that?" My father chimed in, his voice full of false heartiness. "We need to hear all about this company of yours. I.S. Thompson, eh? Sounds very impressive." They were trying to reclaim me, to fold my success story into the family narrative they had so carefully curated. They wanted to be the proud parents of the CEO, conveniently forgetting that for the past decade, they had been the disappointed parents of the dropout. I refused to give them the detailed, triumphant monologue they were fishing for. "There's not much to tell," I lied. "It's mostly just long hours and a lot of paperwork." I was deliberately boring, deliberately obtuse. I denied them the dramatic story they could later recount to their friends. I was taking back control of my own narrative. The most interesting interaction came from Alex. Once the initial shock had worn off, he approached me again, this time with the focused energy of a journalist who had just stumbled upon the story of a lifetime. But he didn't ask about the company's financials or our latest projects. He looked at me with genuine, empathetic curiosity. "How did you do it?" He asked quietly so only I could hear. "Build something that big completely on your own while dealing with this." He gestured vaguely at the tense, awkward scene around us. It was the first time all night that someone had asked a question that truly saw me. Not my success, not my failure, but me. I learned early on to separate the signal from the noise, I told him, a small, genuine smile finally touching my lips. Their opinions were noise. The work was the signal. He nodded, a look of profound respect in his eyes. He got it. As the evening wore on, the dynamic continued to shift. Cousins who had laughed at me earlier now came over to ask for career advice. Uncles who had ignored me now wanted to talk about the stock market. I was polite but distant. I gave them nothing personal. I was a mirror, reflecting their own opportunism back at them. The final act of my silent strategy came as the party was winding down. Aunt Patricia, desperate to regain some semblance of control, announced. It was time to cut the cake for Emily and Alex's engagement. As we all gathered, she made a toast. She spoke of family, of love, and of pride. Then she turned her gaze to me. "And I think we should all give a special toast to my niece, Isabella," she announced, raising her glass. "For proving that success can come in the most surprising of packages, we are all so incredibly proud of our little CEO." It was her final, desperate gambit, to publicly co-opt my success, to act as if she had been my champion all along. The family raised their glasses, their faces a mixture of guilt and relief. They thought this was the resolution, the moment we would all pretend the ugliness from earlier never happened. They were wrong. I did not raise my glass. I did not smile. I simply held her gaze, my silence a more powerful rebuke than any angry words could ever be. I let the toast hang in the air, unanswered. And in that moment, everyone knew that while I might have come to their party, I was no longer playing by their rules. The days following the reunion were characterized by a sudden and overwhelming flood of communication. My phone, which had previously only received perfunctory holiday and birthday texts from my family, was now buzzing constantly. It began with my mother. She called the next morning, her voice laced with a nervous energy I hadn't heard before. She didn't mention the reunion directly. Instead, she talked about Emily's wedding planning, about a neighbor's dog, about anything and everything except the elephant in the room. Then she casually said, "You know, your father and I were thinking. We have a little bit saved up, and we were wondering if your company, had any investment opportunities for family." I nearly dropped the phone. After a decade of treating me like a financial liability, their first real acknowledgement of my success was a request to profit from it. The audacity was breathtaking. "My company is privately held, Mom," I said, my voice cold. "We're not seeking private investment at this time." The polite corporate speak was a wall she couldn't climb. There was a disappointed silence on the other end of the line before she quickly changed the subject. Next came Daniel. He sent a long, rambling text message that was a masterwork of non-apology. He said he was shocked and impressed, and that he always knew I had it in me. He wrote, "I'm sorry if things were awkward the other night. You know how Patricia can be." He was blaming our aunt, blaming the situation, blaming everything but his own dismissive and hurtful behavior. He ended the text with a proposition. His engineering firm was looking to upgrade their digital security, and he wondered if Aegis Cyber could give him a family discount. He was treating my life's work, my multi-million-dollar corporation, like a neighborhood pizza place. I didn't reply to the text. My silence was its own answer. The most galling, however, was the email from Aunt Patricia. It was titled a heartfelt apology, but the contents were anything but. She wrote about how hard it is to see the younger generation succeed in unconventional ways, and how her old-fashioned mindset sometimes gets the better of her. She apologized if I said anything that was misconstrued as unsupportive. It was a classic, "I'm sorry you were offended" apology, designed to absolve her of all responsibility. The final paragraph revealed her true motive. She mentioned that her son, my cousin Mark, who had been laughing the loudest at my expense, had just graduated with a marketing degree and was brilliant with computers. She wondered if I might have an internship or an entry-level position for him at my exciting company. She had gone from mocking my career to trying to leverage it for her own child's benefit in less than 72 hours. I let the messages pile up, unanswered. I was observing their patterns, collecting the data, just as I would with a potential security threat. Their behavior was predictable. First, the clumsy attempt to normalize the situation, then the transactional requests for favors and money. There was no genuine remorse, no acknowledgement of the years of emotional damage, no apology for making me feel like an outcast in my own family. They weren't sorry for how they treated me, they were sorry that they had miscalculated my worth. Their respect wasn't earned, it was bought by a 9-figure valuation. I decided it was time to set new terms and conditions for our relationship. I called a family meeting. Not a casual get-together, but a formal request. I told my parents, Daniel and Patricia, that I had something important to discuss and that I wanted to meet them at a neutral location, a private room at a quiet restaurant. The summons from me, the former family pariah, was so unusual that they all agreed immediately, their curiosity and likely their greed getting the better of them. I didn't invite my sister Emily. This wasn't her battle to fight, and I wanted to spare her the ugliness. They arrived at the restaurant looking nervous and expectant. They probably thought I was going to announce a family trust fund or hand out shares in my company. They saw me as a sudden, unexpected lottery ticket. I let them order their drinks, and then I began. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I spoke with the same calm, measured tone I used when briefing a board of directors. I asked you here today because we need to discuss what happened at the reunion, I started. And more importantly, what has been happening for the last 10 years. I looked at each of them in turn. For a decade, I have been treated as a failure. I have been mocked, dismissed, and disrespected by the people who were supposed to be my family. My choices were ridiculed, and my silence was interpreted as shame. I paused, letting the words sink in. The other night, you didn't discover my success. You discovered my net worth. And that is the only thing that has changed for you. Your sudden pride and support are not for me, Isabella. They are for I.S. Thompson, the CEO. I then addressed each of them directly. To my parents, your approval was conditional and I no longer require it. To Daniel, you were more concerned with being embarrassed by me than with defending me. I am not your social liability or your business connection. And finally, to Aunt Patricia, you built your sense of superiority on belittling me. Your apology was an insult, and your request for my cousin was a demonstration that you have learned absolutely nothing. The answer is no. He will not work for my company. I laid out the new terms. Our relationship, if it was to continue, would be one of polite distance. There would be no more unsolicited advice, no more judgmental comments, and absolutely no requests for money, investments, or jobs. You will treat me with the basic human decency that you failed to show me for the last decade, I stated clearly. My life and my work are not topics for your gossip or your financial gain. This is not a negotiation. These are the terms. The room was silent. They were stunned. They had come expecting a handout and had received a reckoning instead. There were sputtered protests, attempts to defend their actions, but I simply held up a hand. I am not here to argue, I said. I am here to inform you of the new reality. I placed enough cash on the table to cover their meals and drinks. I have a meeting to get to. With that, I stood up and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them to sit with the consequences of their own actions. The price of their disrespect was simple. They had lost access to me. They could have the ghost, I.S. Thompson, the name in the articles. But Isabella, the daughter, the sister, the niece, she was no longer available to them. Leaving the restaurant felt like closing a compromised file and purging it from the system. It was a clean, decisive action that left no room for ambiguity. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free from the weight of their expectations and judgments. The immediate aftermath was a predictable mix of anger and disbelief on their part. My mother left a tearful voicemail about how I was tearing the family apart. Daniel sent a single, angry text. You have no idea what family means. Aunt Patricia, predictably, told everyone who would listen that my success had made me arrogant and cruel. Their narrative shifted seamlessly. I was no longer the pitiful failure. I was now the heartless tycoon. It didn't matter. I had stopped caring about the characters they assigned me in their family drama. I was no longer participating in the production. The only relationship I was interested in salvaging was the one with my sister. I called Emily a few days later and asked to meet her for coffee. I was worried that my actions would create a rift between us, that she would feel forced to choose a side. When she arrived, she looked tired but resolute. "I heard what happened at the restaurant," she said before I could even speak. "Alex told me. He thinks you're the coolest person he's ever met, by the way." A small smile touched her lips. "I'm not mad at you, Izzy. I'm proud of you. I've wanted someone to stand up to them for years, but I was never brave enough." Her words were an immense relief. "I didn't want to put you in the middle of it," I explained. "I know," she said, her eyes welling up. "But I've been in the middle of it my whole life just by being there, watching how they treated you. It was always wrong. I was just too scared to say anything. I'm sorry for that." We talked for over an hour, a real conversation, maybe the first one we'd had in years that wasn't filtered through the static of family politics. I told her about the struggles of starting my company, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt. She told me about her own pressures, the constant need to be the good daughter to make up for my perk. Eaved failings, we were two sides of the same coin, both shaped by the same toxic environment. "What happens now?" she asked. "With us, nothing changes," I promised. "I'll be at your wedding, I'll be your sister, but my relationship with them has to be different. I'm drawing new borders." She nodded in understanding. "They're borders we probably should have had all along." And so, a new normal began. I saw my parents and my brother only at obligatory family events like Emily's wedding. Our interactions were brief, polite, and superficial. They kept to the terms I had laid out. There were no more jabs, no more requests. They treated me with the cautious respect one might afford a dangerous business associate. The warmth was gone, but in truth, it had never really been there. It had been an illusion, and I was better off without it. Aunt Patricia and I never spoke again. We would be in the same room, and she would look right through me, a silent acknowledgement of her total defeat. My relationship with Emily and Alex, however, flourished. Freed from the oppressive family dynamic, we were able to build a genuine connection. Alex became a good friend, a fellow traveler in the tech world who respected my mind, not my bank account. We would talk for hours about industry trends, new technologies, and the challenges of innovation. Through him, Emily began to understand my world, and through her, I reconnected with a part of myself I had long since buried. The part that could just be a sister, an aunt to their future children, a family member in the truest sense of the word. About a year after the infamous reunion, Alex published a major feature story. It was an in-depth profile of Aegis Cyber, but more than that, it was a profile of me. For the first time, I agreed to an interview and a photo shoot. The article was titled "The Architect of Aegis," and it told my story on my terms. It spoke of my decision to leave college not as a failure, but as a calculated risk. It detailed the years of hard work, the sacrifices, the vision. It was a reclamation of my own history. The picture that accompanied the article was of me in my office, not smiling, but looking directly at the camera with a calm, confident gaze. I looked like myself. I have no idea if my parents or my brother or my aunt ever read it. It doesn't matter. I didn't do it for them. I did it for me, and for anyone else who has ever been told that their path was the wrong one. My life is still demanding. I still live in my minimalist apartment, and my company is still my primary focus. But something fundamental has changed. The fortress I built is no longer just about keeping the chaos out. It's also about protecting the peace I've finally found within. I have my work, I have my sister, and I have my self-respect. I have a family of my own making, built not on obligation or shared blood, but on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine love. I finally closed the door on my past, not by running from it, but by facing it down and rewriting the ending. And that's a victory no one can ever take away from me.